Okay, so in your soap kit, you will get soap. You have enough here to make 2 bars of whatever you have. This is a cute pirate soap. We have a couple other designs, our girly man or our tub flap girl. You might get those as well. So you get your reusable mold. You get a little tiny spray bottle of rubbing alcohol. This is great for popping bubbles and also bonds soap between 2 layers. So you're going to use that a couple times. A little stirring stick, a little dropper. You're going to use that to fill in your little design, whatever you have on your bar. And your fragrance oil. And this is enough also for 2 soap bars. You will also need from your own home supplies a nice, stable, safe cutting board, a small but sharp knife, a couple microwave safe containers, one, just a little one to melt a couple little small amount of soap, and then a little bit bigger one. This one's a cup or 8 ounces. This is a perfect size. And then you can also get like a mug or something of pretty hot water. You're going to use this to flush out your little dropper if you need to. And a couple paper towels, always a great thing to have around. Also, you will need a microwave. If you are a child, please make sure you get an adult. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Don't do it by yourself. The soap can get very hot. We don't want anybody getting burned. Parents, watch your kids. So the first thing you're going to do is melt a couple of these little bonbons of soap to make the design in your soap. Now these are all wrapped in plastic, so you have to take that off before you microwave it. Just take your knife or scissors and make a small little cut, peel it off, throw it in your small microwave safe container. Again, children, careful with these knives. Have your adults do this. Throw this away. We're going to microwave this for a little bit. So you're going to microwave a couple of these bonbons. It's good to have your soap stirring stick handy. We're going to try this for about 15 seconds, see how it's doing. Maybe do a few more seconds if it's not quite all melted. Press and wait. Alright, let's see how that's doing. Be careful removing. This is not hot, but it could get hot. Okay, so that's pretty melted. There's a couple tiny little chunks, but let's give a little stir. That's perfect. Okay, so what you're going to do now, make sure again that your bonbons are melted. You're going to take your alcohol spray and spray your mold a couple of times with that. That's going to help the soap kind of settle into all the little bits of the design. Whoops, I didn't have very good aim there, so there we go. It's also good for popping bubbles if you come up with any bubbles in your soap. So you're going to take your dropper. I take this stick out now. And you're going to squeeze the air out and then stick in the soap and suck up some nice hot soap. And then lay your design nice and flat on the counter. And just fill that in. And don't worry if you mess up and go over the edge. You can just let it harden and clean it up after. Fix it in post. And look at his little crossbones there, and make sure you get all the way over to the edges, and that looks pretty good. Oh no, a bubble! If those bubbles don't pop, you can always give it another nice squirt. I'm gonna do that anyway. Oops. And just do a tiny bit more on him. And if your thing gets too gunky, you can always wipe it off on the paper towel, but it's a little bit better. Now, I might have overfilled that just a bit, but we can, like I said, fix that. So once you're done, just give it, that's pretty good. All right, we're gonna let that harden. That shouldn't take too long at all, probably 5 minutes or so. One thing you can do when after you've poured your design and have this extra soap, you can just kind of, as it cools, kind of goop it all up and pour it in some, like, throw it on some little saran wrap and wrap it up, and you'll have a little mini soap ball. You can also just have fun with it. Or you can throw it out. So another little tip, if your dropper gets clogged up with soap, you can, that's what your cup of hot water here is for. Just squeeze it, let it fill with hot water, let it kind of soak. Your stick too, you can, you know, soak it in there to liquefy the stuff, get it off. And this you can just kind of keep flushing it out until it is to your optimal satisfaction. Okay, so next, now we're gonna pour the base of the soap. So you've got basically your design. That's the first part we made. Also, if you do spill over the edge or something, now that this is hardened up after 5 minutes, you can take this wooden stick, clean it off, and you can just scrape off whatever parts, you know, this one we didn't go over, but you can just scrape off and clean it up that way. So now we're ready for step 2. Again, this is wrapped in plastic, so please carefully cut and remove the plastic before microwaving. That would be terrible soap, plastic embedded in it. So for this larger chunk, you're going to want to, again, carefully cut this just into quarters. It'll just microwave a little bit better. Keep your fingers away from the blades. And then throw that into your second microwave safe container, and we're going to zap this. So we're going to microwave this as well. Let's do it in 15-second increments. That way we can keep checking on it. If you heat it for too long at once, it sometimes starts boiling and it loses moisture. You can always add a few drops of water back, but you also have to wait for it to cool down because it'll melt your little cute design that you just made. So again, we'll check on this, and if we need to, we'll stir it. So 15 seconds, it's partially melted, still have some chunks. You can just kind of stir it around a little bit. Scrape that off, we'll throw it back for 15 seconds. Take another look. Alright, that might have done it. It looks pretty good. Yeah, it's nice and melted. That's even a little hot. You can see it's kind of steamy. So that is definitely melted. We probably will let this cool down for a few minutes. So if you do overheat your soap and it's too hot, you'll be able to tell because it'll be some steam coming off, and it'll be very, very runny. You also have lots of fine, tiny bubbles. What you can do is, also when that happens, it loses some moisture, so you can take a couple drops of water, just add a couple drops, and stir that in. That should be fine. And then you just want to let it cool down just a little bit. And again, if you ever get bubbles in your soap, you can, I'll just keep it nice and viscous. That's the word I want. So the last step before we pour the soap is you're going to take your fragrance and use about half of that to scent your soap. So just carefully kind of tap it out. It's about half. Put the cap back on, or else everything will smell. And just stir that in. If you start getting kind of skin like that on top of your soap, you can just give a tiny little spritz. Alright. Yum, that smells good. Alright, so we're now ready to pour part 2. So you're going to take your first part, that's all nice and hardened, and spray that a couple times with the alcohol. That's going to let the layers stick together. So see, it's nice and wet. Alright. Stir and pour. Again, nice stable surface, and somewhere where you're not going to be banging into this, because now it's going to be full of wet hot soap. And so we're going to give it a good stir, and pour, if you can help it, pour like in the corner, not directly onto the design. Just pour, and it'll kind of tip and away. Alright, perfect. And just scrape out the rest. And again, get your best friend, the alcohol spray. Give the surface a nice squirt. You'll see it'll pop any of the bubbles. And now you're just going to sit and wait and be patient. And I want to let that harden up for give it about 45 minutes to an hour. But you want to make sure it's nice and solid before you try to unmold it, or you'll get a wobbly soap. So after about an hour, your soap will be nice and hard. And you don't have to do that, but anyway, just kind of loosen it up, flip it over, pop it with your thumbs, and voila! A soap that you can now use. How cute is that? Whoop! Yay! Happy soaping!